Since the mid to late 90s, Triple J, which is an Australian government-funded national broadcaster radio station, has been the source of finding an audience for most alternative artists and musicians to come out of this country. The thing that's been great about them is that they broadcast to every major capital city in Australia, and you could, for example, live in Perth and have your music played to people in Sydney who could become a fan of your band. For many years, this was the main way that Australian alternative musicians found an audience all over the country, although with the advancements in streaming and the popularity of Spotify, it's not really the case any longer. This video though, I'd like to go back and think about some bands and artists that didn't use Triple J to find major success as an alternative musician in this country. If you can think of any others, please drop them in the comments here. And of course, I'm only counting bands that came to be in the period of Triple J being a national broadcasting radio station. So that's from roughly 1995 onwards, and I'm cutting it off at about 2020. So first on my list is an alternative rock band who found a lot of success in the late 90s and early 2000s with some really popular songs that you still hear to this day. They get played on ads and sometimes commercial radio stations still. They had some absolute bangers back in the day, which I still really enjoy to hear every time they come on. I'm not really sure why Triple J ignored this band. I guess they thought maybe they were a little too pop. I wasn't really old enough to know what was getting played on Triple J when this band was prevalent, but I'm pretty sure they didn't really get played at all.
Yeah, it's creeping up slowly. She's taking me over. It's turning me on.
Next up, I've got another alternative rock band here who found that success similar to my previous one I've mentioned, with an alternative rock sound that had a little bit of a pop niche as well. Now, as I understand, this band did get a little bit of airtime on Triple J to start off with, but the mainstream really came to them hard when they released their album, and they had a couple of songs that got a lot of commercial airplay, and they were used on TV shows and ads. So it really wasn't Triple J that broke this band, it was just the mainstream media.
Someday I will be here, babe. Someday.
So for number 3, I've gone with, once again, an alternative rock band who kind of started to pop up in this sort of alternative rock emo scene that was growing in the mid 2000s. And you may recall this group because of their one viral hit, which got really big on YouTube because of a very popular viral video where a man walked around asking for free hugs. Essentially, this was the way that they became famous, and it really was no thanks to Triple J at all. On doing some research though, I actually found that they entered a few competitions on Triple J and seemed to get a little bit of recognition, but it certainly wasn't Triple J that got them to the success that they found with their viral video.
And I'll take you for who you are if you take me for everything.
Okay, my fourth act is a duo of sisters, and if you're hearing that, you're probably guessing who this is going to be, but they played that kind of pop punk, pop rock music, which was really popular in the mid 2000s. Their first album had some really big hits on it that got played on movie soundtracks, and they were a very popular band. And I guess Triple J just didn't play them because they were considered to be too pop, and the mainstream were the people that gave them their success.
Come, baby, we ain't gonna live forever. Let me show you all the things that we could do.
Okay, the fifth band that I'm talking about now are once again from that sort of emo demographic that was really popular in the mid 2000s. And I guess Australia, or the media here in Australia, thought that we just needed an emo act to go along with your Fall Out Boys and your Panic at the Discos, and this was our version of that. Triple J really didn't care about this band, and it was the mainstream who gave them their attention, and like those other emo bands that I mentioned, they found a pretty big audience amongst teenage girls. In seventh, I've got a very similar sounding band here, and they popped up in that kind of Paramore pop punk niche with the female vocals, Once again, the American labels came to them, and that's how they found the success. Ironically though, after about 10 years of having a lot of success, Triple J finally jumped onto this band and started giving them a lot of attention and played their new music, and they gave them a version opportunity. So yeah, I guess that happens sometimes too. Okay, the 8th band that I'm talking about here are arguably the band that had the most success of any on this list that I'm coming up with right now, without attention from Triple J. But of course, Triple J jumped on the train eventually with them. And you might even be working out already who this is, but they are arguably the most successful metal band to come out of Australia. They were huge in the mid to late 2000s in that metalcore scene, and I suppose you can attribute their success to a few things. I guess MySpace was really big at the time. They did pretty well on that. They toured their butts off and just played shows all over Australia and the world for that matter. They just had a very strong, tight fan base who, loved their stuff and bought their merch and they had really successful DVDs randomly. People loved the DVDs. But this band were just so big. Triple J eventually couldn't ignore them, and now you'll see them get voted into Hottest 100s. Number 9 on this list is a band who I guess you could say were just way too pop for Triple J at the time. But where Triple J is right now, if this band came out, I don't think anything would stop them from playing them. And they were kind of like a boy band, I guess you would say, although they did play guitars and drums and they played kind of pop punk stuff. But it was ironically a little bit of help from One Direction that got them their success. When One Direction found them, they pumped them up. I think they got to tour with One Direction. I believe they played covers of One Direction's songs, maybe. My knowledge of this band is not the best, I will admit. I don't seek out a lot of knowledge of this band that I'm talking about. You've probably guessed who they are, but yeah, they play pop punk, and they had a lot of success, but Triple J, no. They did not want to touch this band, and even to this day, they still don't really touch them. I think they have a guy in their band, though, that does make some solo music that Triple J might play a little bit, but I think this is just too much of a mainstream act for Triple J to go towards. But really, I mean, pop punk, it's alternative music, so... Okay, number 10. Now, this one is probably the most controversial act on my list, and he's a rapper, so you can probably guess who I'm talking about. He likes to push the boundaries. He was someone, I think, that just said too many controversial things for Triple J to play or to be bold enough to play. And I think he also had way too much of like this underground underbelly fan base that Triple J probably just missed for a long time as well. But I'd probably say over the 2010s, he was arguably, and in the early 2010s as well, arguably, probably the second or third biggest hip-hop act in the country. I don't think anyone could top Hilltop Hoods, but this guy was definitely in the top 3 or 5. And you probably know who I'm talking about. Well known for issues with the police, issues with drugs, Xannies, you name it. Triple J just didn't want to touch him.
Rolled a blunt, now I'm staring at the thick smoke. Say I didn't work hard, is that a sick joke? I've lost everything from rap but never quit though.
Okay, number 11 is an interesting one. Now, this is a guy who made like bedroom pop music in the early 2010s. He really blew up on the internet. I'm not exactly sure how he did. I guess, it was that kind of like SoundCloud niche sort of sound that a lot of people were getting into around then, and people liked it. I think he might have had some money or people behind him pushing him, though. I recall he actually acted in one of the like Wolverine or X-Men movies, I think. He had a very small role as an actor before he was a famous musician, so surely I think he probably had some connections and people behind him, but nevertheless, he made really good bedroom pop music, comparable to, I would say comparable to Lorde and Lana Del Rey, who Triple J loved at the time. But for this guy, this Perth bedroom artist, they didn't want to touch him. They did not want to touch him, even though I think he made comparable music to other artists they were playing. I guess they thought that he was just too pop for them. But eventually, they just randomly decided to start playing him about 10 years after he was famous, and he very recently did well in Hottest 100, so I guess you know who I'm talking about.
My youth is yours, dripping on skies, sipping waterfalls. My youth is...
Okay, number 12. Now, it's another one here that I think Triple J just either they just missed them and the mainstream caught them first, or they just thought they were too poppy. So now this is a band of, I believe, siblings, and they come from Brisbane, and they had some really big pop hits in the early 2010s. And look, I think that they were comparable in their sound to a lot of artists that were getting played on Triple J. You could probably compare them to like San Cisco or the Jungle Giants or something like that. Maybe a bit poppier, but I don't think there was any good reason for Triple J not to play them. But the mainstream just got to them first, and they found a lot of mainstream success without Triple J.
So say Geronimo, say Geronimo, say Geronimo, say Geronimo, say.
Okay, number 13. Now, people in the comments can probably help clarify this one for me, but this is a band that are like a rootsy, folky band, and I don't believe Triple J played them. They might have given them a few spots here or there, but I don't think you can attribute their success to Triple J at all. Now, they might have got a bit of airtime on Double J, and I think that they do get airtime on Double J right now. I don't know if it was really Double J either that really kind of put them out there. I think that this band just found their success through their own endeavors and their own hard work, and they just kind of pushed their way through, and eventually maybe Double J kind of jumped on them. But certainly Triple J did not give them their major audience that they have. And, now they're one of the biggest bluesy, rootsy bands going around the country. They get nominated for and win ARIAs usually, and they're a great band.
I'm so good. I'm so gonna on you.
Okay, number 14. Okay, I'm going to talk about my last three kind of all together here, because I think they're kind of in a group. But the 14th one is a solo artist from Australia who makes kind of artsy pop music, and he's often sought after by other famous bands and musicians to help collaborate with their songwriting. For example, he's helped Brandon Flowers and the Killers to write music before, and he's toured with the Killers. He gets a lot of attention on that kind of underground internet sort of music zeitgeist, I guess, headed by the likes of Anthony Fantano from the Needle Drop Rate Your Music website, Reddit, places like that. And so does my number 15 person as well. These two guys are kind of hand in hand, where they're both artsy pop and like artsy bedroom pop sort of music, adult contemporary, I guess you could even call them. But yeah, they're both quite popular in that sort of like niche Reddit, Rate Your Music, Needle Drop sort of scene. But Triple J just ignores my number 14 and 15 too. although they did have one song that they did together with a very famous video that became a meme. If you know Australian music, you're probably working out these two artists I'm speaking of.
It wouldn't give us any closure. All cowboys need to trust.
And my last one too is a band that's kind of in this sort of similar niche where they're actually really popular in that sort of rate your music, the needle drop, Reddit culture. And I think they get played on Double J quite a lot, but Triple J, they did not give them any attention as far as I am aware. But they kind of play a little bit more, how would you even describe this music? World music, I guess they play sort of world music, very artsy music. And they've even been nominated for a Grammy, this last band on my list, number 16. 16 bands and artists that became successful with underground music or alternative music who didn't use Triple J to find their success. Can you think of any others that I've missed, or do you think I've missed the mark with some of these? Maybe some kind of did get a little bit of Triple J attention and I wasn't aware. Please feel free to comment and let me know.